Mark Carney has claimed that he's different than Justin Trudeau, yet all of the people that he has around him, all of the policies that he is putting forward are all the same as the policies that the Liberal Party has thus far used to drive Canada to be one of the poorest in the OECD. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Promised he was going to be different than the Liberal Party that has brought on such hardships to Canadians, has brought on the economic shrinkage that really led to many of those hardships. He said to you that he was going to be completely different. He's not the same person at all. He's not even an insider. Then it turns out that he is in fact an insider, and he has surrounded himself with all of the same people. All of those same people probably making all of the decisions that all of the time were being driven by the policymakers of the Liberal Party, one of which is Mark Carney. By contrast, we have Pierre Poilievre talking about how he wants to build things. Now, when asked about Bill C69, the two of them have very different answers.
How do you reconcile keeping Bill C69 with your plans to build infrastructure in Canada? Do you plan to repeal Bill C69?
We do not plan to repeal Bill C69, to answer your question directly. What we have said, what's essential, is to work at this time of crisis to come together as a nation, all levels of government, to focus on those projects that are going to make material differences to our country, to Canadian workers, and to our future, and work closely together.
There you have it. In his own words, he will not repeal Bill C69. He's going to keep it in place, and then he's going to try to give you smoke and mirrors by saying, well, we're going to identify projects that are going to help all of us put together, which of course means we're going to do it my way and only my way. We're going to talk about how we want to build these houses that will never get built because I'm going to control how many people can build them. I'm not going to let people go into a property and dig it up and cut the trees down and build their home without my strict permission. And this is not going to help Canada's economy at all, but I will try and convince you of that, all the while realizing that the LNG that my pipeline moves out of Brazil and moves out of the Middle East makes me enormous amounts of money, and I will leave the Canadian oil trapped in Alberta, just like I have been trying to do for years now. By contrast, here's what Pierre Poilievre has to say.
Donald Trump wants Mark Carney. We know why he wants Mark Carney. Because he wants more liberal weakness. He's seen how the Liberals have totally weakened our economy over the lost Liberal decade. And he wants that weakness to continue so that he can take further advantage of us. We're going to support doubling oil and gas production here in Newfoundland and Labrador. We're going to back the offshore by repealing C69, the No New Pipelines law, repealing the energy cap, repealing the entire carbon tax, including the industrial tax, which Carney and the Liberals want to keep applying on the offshore sector.
Well, I think that's fairly straightforward. He's going to repeal C69 and he's going to allow Newfoundland to develop the oil resources they have offshore. That means that there will be a lot of jobs and there will be less of a drain from the East Coast to the West Coast. People forget that there is a lot of movement that way as they search for jobs. I mean, they need good jobs. Of course, the Liberal Party wants to turn the entire Grand Banks oil field into a wind farm. That way there that they can disturb all of the whales and all of the fishing that goes on there. You won't be able to touch any of it except for the exclusive, gigantic ships that come in from from other countries and scoop up all of the fish, leaving the local population bereft of the ability to make a living. I mean, ask yourself, which one do you think sounds better for the future of Canada? Which one do you think sounds better for projects that we should be working on together? Many of you have likely heard about Paul Chang resigning because the RCMP is investigating him for all kinds of wrongdoing that would have came out from just this one announcement of his. You know, there's another level and another wrinkle added to it because it was a political spectrum. So now you're into the realm of election interference. You can't target your opponent that way, no matter what they tell you on TV. Mark Carney was asked about it today when he was at one of his rallies, and his answer was pretty eye-opening.
It appears the involvement of the RCMP forced candidate Paul Chang to bow out of the race. Meanwhile, the Conservatives just removed their problematic candidate in Windsor within an hour of learning of issues of this individual. Why didn't you do the same with Chang? And was this a teachable moment for you?
Mr. Chang made his resignation, offered his resignation last night. I accepted it. As I said yesterday, his comments were deeply troubling and regrettable. We will move on with looking for a new candidate for Markham, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, his words were deeply, deeply troubling, and we're going to move on and we'll leave it at that. What kind of answer is that? He might as well have just said, well, I didn't have the courage to take him on because of where he's from and who his friends are. He might as well have just said, well, it's okay if my people threaten them. If those people threaten us, it'll be a completely different response. He might as well have just said, well, as the elites of the country, we're going to treat ourselves differently than we would treat ordinary Canadians. I mean, that's what we were looking at here. We're looking at a man who didn't have the courage, the wherewithal, or the desire to target someone who literally threatened his running mate in a democracy. All the while he's trying to convince you that he's different. I don't see different. I see someone who's trying to take Canada into a place that Canadians shouldn't go. We all have our own opinion on foreign interference, but I believe that anyone who ran away from another country to come to this one needs to leave behind those governments as well. Now, the reporter made reference to the, within an hour, the Conservative Party threw out their person in southwestern Ontario, which I believe was in a Windsor riding. Here's the article. It was Windsor. Southwestern Ontario Conservative candidate Mark McKenzie out over unacceptable comments. Mr. McKenzie will not be the Conservative candidate, the party said during week 2 of the federal election campaign. I picked this up from the CBC. And here it says the Conservative candidate in southwestern Ontario riding Windsor, Tecumseh, Lakeshore is no longer running in the federal election over past comments. Apparently he was on a podcast a little while ago, a couple of years back, and he was calling for public execution of we will say now departed members of the Liberal government. Of course, Canada has a history of public execution, so I don't know necessarily why that would bother people. So it must be that he was talking about, perpetuating these things against the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. I think that the Conservative Party probably did the right thing. I mean, again, we can't have that tone, but you can see how it is exactly the same thing. It's one person making a threat against another person, and this guy wasn't even a sitting MP. The Liberal Party member is currently a sitting MP. I mean, he's resigning from his post, but he's the incumbent, as they call it. This individual, I don't believe was. I think that he was just a person who decided to run in this election, who was on a podcast and probably said some things that amongst his people was pretty, he was probably frustrated and angry and all those things. And the Conservative Party said, you know what, you can't be, that's unacceptable. It's not good behavior. It's not honorable behavior. And so we would ask that you leave, thanks, but no thanks. Now, he can still run as an independent. He can run for other parties, I suppose, if they're willing to welcome him in. What I'm trying to show you here is how one leader handled it versus how the same situation was handled by a different leader. And then you have to ask yourself, if it was you in that situation, if you were the one that needed the protection from the government, where would you think you would get the most support? That's what you got to ask yourself. There's another stark contrast between the two leaders. Let's hear what Pierre Poilievre has to say.
We, as Canada First Conservatives, are announcing that with a change in government, we will double the permanent funding available for Canada's small craft harbors. We will reverse the MPA zones that ban fish harvesting, and we will fight to get the quota back for our harvesters, not foreign harvesters.
those of you that are not necessarily going to make the connection on how I draw a contrast between Pierre Poilievre in this instance and Mark Carney's Liberals, what Pierre Poilievre was describing, you would understand if you were ever lived in a fishing village or if you've ever come from a maritime community. Most of these small vessel harbors that he's referring to are actually villages built around the harbor. So there's houses, there might be a convenience store, there might be a restaurant, but there's a town hall, and there's all little very sturdy homes that have been built because this is a lifestyle that's been going on for quite a long time. Then you go up the coast, like say in a half an hour, and you will find another one wherever the next inlet is, and then you will put these small fishing vessels in. Of course, a small fishing vessel has miles of net and miles of rope and will hold 3 or 4 full-grown men, and they make their catch, and then they come in and they have to make repairs, and they dock the boat and they go home and they hang out with their family, and then they do the whole thing all over again. We won't discuss how the international shipping comes in and tears up all of that and robs them of their livelihood. We will leave that for a different discussion. What I want to show you, what I want to point at the contrast is how by doubling the amount of money that this industry will be able to have, Pierre Poilievre is actually invigorating a small town ideal. Villages up and down the coast will now be able to maintain their livelihoods for that much longer. By contrast, the Liberals want to cram us all into high-rise apartment buildings that are, multi-generational. They don't want us to work our natural resources at all, because that goes in contrast with certain political ideologies believe in. I don't believe that we should be cramming ourselves into high rises. I believe that we should be spreading out. I have a very comprehensive idea on how to solve that problem. I will leave that for now. Here, I will just say I'm going to wrap. I want to thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next time.